Good morning. It's 13 November 2015. It's Friday the 13th. What an excellent day to speak on this subject of motorcycle noise enforcement made easy. I just downloaded or uploaded a version of this video 2 days ago, and I have received feedback that my initial version, it was much too long, and no one would watch it. Well, I'm going to make a short version. This is primarily for law enforcement. Number one, excuse the noise. My wife and I rescue animals, and we have a lot of animals on our farm here, so if you some noise interruptions, I'm sorry. My name is Rick Holtsclaw. I'm the originator, moderator of the Loud Motorcycle Suck Facebook page. Real quick, I am a retired 31-year law enforcement officer with the city of Houston, Texas. I have owned, operated, maintained 31 motorcycles since age 12. I've ridden professionally for years, rode for HPD during the 80s as a motorcycle officer. I know motorcycles. I know bikers. I know the biker mentality. Accumulated many hundreds of thousands of miles on motorcycles. Please do not permit the fact that I was just a lowly patrol officer or senior patrolman with the city of Houston to dissuade you from listening to what I have to say. I've been in the trenches with this subject on motorcycle noise enforcement in a way that only another video would explain to you what I went through enforcing this law and fighting the biker rights organizations who did not want this law or did not want my strategy to take root. They fought and they fought, and my mayor and my chief cowed to their cries, unfortunately. But this works. I have a 99.8% conviction rate for all noise citations brought up before me for adjudication. I know that it works, and it'll work for you. It's cost less, and it not only provides revenue for your coffer, but it is excellent, and it is not beatable in court. So it works. Real quick, why a lowly patrol officer? You have a master's degree. Why didn't you promote? I liked working the street. I liked flying helicopters. I liked riding motorcycles. I liked patrolling the streets in a patrol car. That was my thing. I've always shunned a desk. I would have gone somewhere and made some money if that's what I wanted to do. I took the promotional exam one time to increase my retirement benefits, and it was, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, it was a time when the city decided that they were going to adhere to affirmative action mandates, and I was caught up in a tumultuous lawsuit in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals over unfair hiring or promoting practices. You can see that on the internet. Rick Holtsclaw, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, if you want to see that. I never took the test again. I stayed a patrolman, and I worked in that capacity, and I did the very best that I could do. Okay, law enforcement and noise initiative for vehicular noise, specifically motorcycles, made easy. Why do this, Rick? Confusion. Confusion out there and a lack of enforcement on the part of our state and local law enforcement agencies. Some of that confusion or some of that is because the laws seem to be too vague, or you just don't have the equipment, or you don't have the time, or you don't have the interest. And that's generally what the problem is. But that doesn't need to be. I'll show you how you can do that without any money, how you can do it quickly, because we already have a standard by which to judge these motorcycle exhausts. Okay, excuse the glasses, I'm getting older. Like I said, I'm the originator, moderator of the Loud Motorcycle Suck Facebook page. If you have any questions, please come over there. I've made a long version of this video. It goes into more detail, but it is long. It's approximately 45 minutes long. Okay, the biker rights groups do not want this information out there. They are trying to pass legislation as we speak that would require the use of a sound meter in order to enforce noise on their motorcycles. Well, why do they want a sound meter? Why don't we as law enforcement not want a sound meter? Number one, the sound meter, when it's introduced into adjudication, it opens up a plethora of legal challenges, unnecessary challenges that make adjudicating noise cases extremely difficult because of, number one, expense. Number two, when you introduce electronics or mechanics into an adjudicatory process and you're trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt guilt, defense attorneys have a heyday. You need compliancy, you need calibration, you need training, you need specific testing sites without ambient noise. Yes, the J2825 test is out there, but it is inadequate. It does not adequately represent the drive-by test performed for the EPA's rigid testing standards. The J2825 test is okay. I have used it personally, but I do not recommend it because of the plethora of legal challenges that it will cause you in adjudication. Do not include decibel regulations in your noise ordinances. Now, most of our state laws are worded with something excessive or unusual noise. That's all you need. That really is all you need, and I'll tell you why. Number one, what's the problem? We have a billion-dollar aftermarket exhaust industry out there who is basically convoluted. The collusion can be defined as nothing short of a criminal conspiracy. Vance and Hines, Bubs, Reinhardt's, Pythons, D&D, it just goes on. It's a billion-dollar industry. Well, why the criminal conspiracy? Because they are manufacturing exhaust mechanisms that do not comply to federal standards for street use. And what they do to sidestep the street use compliancy standards by the EPA is they label their exhaust closed course. That is, the higher end exhaust companies. The lower end don't even bother with labeling them. They just ship them off. They label them closed course. What does that do? That allows them to sidestep the stringent EPA federal regulations referencing noise and particulate emissions. Then they take that closed course, extremely loud exhaust, they box it up and they send it to street motorcycle retailers and to the individual consumer who puts it on their motorcycle, and when they do and they operate it on a public roadway, they are in violation not only of federal but state and local ordinances around this country. And nothing or very little is being done about it. Our EPA has failed us. They're not regulating these people. It shouldn't be a problem for us law enforcement officers, because if the EPA regulated the aftermarket industry, we would cut our excessive vehicular noise on our roadways to at least a fourth of what it is now. There will always be tampering with the OEM factory exhaust. Okay, well then what do we use as a standard? If we don't have a decibel meter, Rick Holtsclaw, former HPD street cop, what do you use as a standard? We have a perfect standard already available to us, and it is the OEM factory exhaust. Why? Because the EPA, through a rigorous scientifically controlled testing procedure, drive-by testing procedure, they regulate not only the exhaust but the total motorcycle noise emissions through a standard drive-by test. I go into detail on the other video, the long version. Pardon me. That drive-by test tests every constituent element on that motorcycle that makes noise. And it cannot, that motorcycle is not permitted to emit more than the total motorcycle noise emissions of 80 dBA. Why is that relevant? Because if you think about it, if you have tested every constituent element on that motorcycle that makes noise, how quiet is that exhaust? It is quiet. It is incredibly quiet. Okay, what did the EPA do to make sure that we know that they have that proper exhaust on their motorcycle? The EPA went in their Code of Federal Regulations, this is spelled out in detail. They labeled that exhaust. It is embossed. It cannot be removed. On that motorcycle exhaust, it comes from the manufacturer, that is approved by the EPA, that is sent to the distributor, that goes to the customer. It has a large, detailed label embossed into the chrome or the stainless or the blackened powder-coated muffler. And it is supposed to be in a readily visible position. Some manufacturers are starting to hide that because the customers are complaining that the label is not aesthetically pleasing. Well, that's wrong. Officer, you shouldn't have to look up underneath that muffler. You shouldn't have to look behind the heat shield. pardon me, you shouldn't have to look behind the heat shield. It should be readily visible to you. That label that's on that exhaust, it also has a compadre label, and it's on the down tube of the motorcycle. It specifically spells out at what speed that motorcycle reaches the total maximum motorcycle noise emissions of 80 dBA. There is your standard, the EPA muffler. Now, the biker rights organizations, they cry foul on a couple of reasons. They say that the EPA label and that exhaust mechanism comes under what's called an acoustical assurance period limitation. That is, for 3,730 miles or 1 year, that motorcycle is required to maintain its acoustical dampening effect, priority effects. Well, on the other video, I explained, I get Keith Fife of the EPA. He comes in and completely debunks that misinformation by the biker rights groups. Those exhausts are made for the life of the motorcycle, and they are not to be removed from the motorcycle. Well, who says they're not to be removed, Rick? Well, the Code of Federal Regulations, after explaining the testing, the labeling, they go into tampering. And they specifically tell you that to alter the OEM factory exhaust or to remove that exhaust and then operate that motorcycle on a public roadway is prohibited. It is illegal. Well, why the 80 dBA regulations, Rick? What's so important about that? 80 dBA has been stipulated as the minimum level of protection for the general public. Why is that significant? Because our exhaust laws, our muffler laws, say excessive or unusual noise, most of them. Pardon me. Atmosphere, weather's cold. We've had a cold front move in, I'm sorry. Why is that significant, the 80 dBA? Because it is the minimum level of protection for the general public. And that's what the motorcycle coming from the manufacturer is regulated to. 80 dBA total motorcycle noise emissions. When these guys either tamper with that OEM exhaust or they remove it and put a racing exhaust, closed course exhaust, which does not belong on the street, it's illegal, and they ride around our communities and our roadways with those illegal exhausts, I have tested them personally, and I can testify to the fact that they are emitting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 times the 80 dBA total motorcycle noise emissions as regulated by the EPA. There's your problem, and there's your standard. Some people call that the label matchup standard. Well, the biker rights organizations cry foul. They say that the EPA never intended for the labels to be used as an enforcement tool. Wrong. A primary example of that is SB 435 out in California. It is basically a label matchup law, a wonderful way to tell whether or not a motorcycle is compliant with EPA regulations and not harming our citizens in this nation. All an officer has to do is look at the motorcycle and see if the EPA label is present on the muffler and does it match the label that's on the down tube of the motorcycle. You're good to go. Well, Rick, what about the guys who tamper with their OEM exhaust? What do we do about them? I ran into this problem in Houston, and I had a gentleman come to court and claim that his motorcycle, his Honda Shadow, was legal because it had the EPA label affixed to the muffler. I asked the prosecutor to follow me out to the parking lot. The prosecutor asked the gentleman to start up his Honda Shadow. Not too bad. When he was asked to ride it around the parking lot, the prosecutor looked at me, and quoting him as closely as I can, he looked at me and said, "I did not know that a Honda could be that loud." And he shook his head and he said, "I think I have hearing damage." The gentleman went back into the court and paid a very steep citation for excessive noise. It is enforceable. Like I said, I have a 99.8% conviction rate on simple, what the bikers want to say is a subjective analysis of the exhaust. Actually, people, our law enforcement, it is not subjective if you are comparing it to the OEM exhaust. But, a little caveat here, subjectivity on exhaust emissions, noise emissions is permissible in court, It has legal precedent backing that up. I had a problem with that in Houston from a supervisor who ordered me to stop because he said it was too subjective. I had that order overturned through Aguilar v. Texas, 2008, Judge Catherine Stone, who clearly articulated and gave us as law enforcement officers the right to subjectively analyze an exhaust mechanism to determine whether or not it is emitting excessive or unusual noise. You have legal precedent, and you have an objective standard, as I've explained to you. Do not allow the biker rights organizations to convolute and confuse. They say, well, that label was never there for enforcement purposes. SB 435 says it is. There's also a supremacy clause in the constitutional law. With my master's degree, I studied constitutional law. I studied white collar crime, and I'm telling you that it's a criminal conspiracy with these loud aftermarket people, and the bikers' rights organizations don't want the truth out there. And I'm telling you the truth as a 31-year veteran, street cop, helicopter pilot, motorcycle cop with the Houston PD. You have an objective standard in the OEM exhaust. Please use that. Under the Supremacy Clause, the states have the right, and it is also notated in the Code of Federal Regulations, that the states do have the right to make up their own laws regulating these exhausts and how they do it. They're not constrained by the federal regulations, other than the fact, under the Supremacy Clause, they cannot make laws that are more lenient than the federal law. They can't usurp the authority of the feds. But the states can make more stringent laws. And California opted to use the label matchup program. It's a great way to enforce the law. Law enforcement, it costs you nothing. It generates millions of dollars in revenue for your coffer, and it's an assured adjudication process during trial. You can use this. It is good. If a defendant wants to prove that his motorcycle is compliant, he needs to bring it to court, let the prosecutor hear it. Our prosecutors, our judges need to be versed in this. They need to know what's going on when you institute something like this. But it will work. You can stop the noise debacle on our roadways. You can get involved, and it works. Noise enforcement, vehicular noise enforcement, take it from a 31-year-old cop, is great probable cause. My warrant arrest statistic shot up when I started using noise as probable cause. One of my last arrests before I retired was a gentleman who was running around in one of the diminutive sports cars with a large coffee can, fart can exhaust system on it. I stopped him. He handed me an ID card. I ran him. This guy had been running around the city of Houston and Harris County for many years with a sexual assault of a child warrant. He was a pervert and still running around our streets, and nobody stopped the guy. His little fart can exhaust got him tucked away. I hope for life. The number of arrests I have made for warrants using exhaust noise. 18 minutes into this video. I am Rick Holtsclaw. I moderate and originated the Loud Motorcycle Suck Facebook page, Rick Holtsclaw at yahoo.com or Rickey Holtsclaw at gmail.com. I'd be happy to discuss this with you. I want you to get to work. Our EPA has failed in regulating these aftermarket people. Please pick up the slack on our state highways, our interstates, and our roadways, our communities. Our mayors are prostituting themselves with these bikers by inviting them into their municipalities. 80% of those guys are illegally equipped, and they're assaulting our citizenry. They're assaulting our children, our handicapped, our elderly, people who are most susceptible to this nonsense. Please stop the noise. Get involved, law enforcement. Do your job. Thank you. Rick Holtzclaw, Loud Motorcycle Sucks, signing out. God bless you.